My wife of 50 years looked me in the eye at breakfast, smiled at me, said, "I love you, Harold," and then drove straight to the bank and emptied every single dollar we had. Every single dollar. 43 years of savings, gone in one afternoon. But here's what she didn't know. I already knew, and I had been ready for 3 weeks.
My name is Mike. I'm 71 years old. I live in a small town outside of Columbus, Ohio. Nothing fancy. Just a good, honest life. I worked as an electrician for 38 years. Got up at 5 every morning. Never missed a day unless I was genuinely sick. Came home, ate dinner with my family, watched the news, went to bed. That was my life. And I loved it. Her name was Donna. We met at a church dance in 1974. She was 20 years old. I was 21. She wore a yellow dress and laughed at everything I said, even when it wasn't funny. I married her 8 months later. We had 3 kids. Raised them in the same house we still lived in. Paid off the mortgage in 2003. Threw a little party in the backyard when we burned the last payment. 50 years. 50 years of birthdays and Christmases and hospital waiting rooms and road trips and arguments about the thermostat. I thought I knew this woman better than I knew myself. I was wrong. It started about 2 years ago. Little things at first. Donna started going to a book club on Thursday nights. She started caring about how she looked again. New clothes. New perfume. I actually thought it was sweet at first. I figured she was feeling good about herself. I told her she looked beautiful. She smiled and said thank you. Then she started staying out later. Then she started putting a passcode on her phone. Now listen, I'm not a suspicious man by nature. I never have been. In 50 years of marriage I never once went through her purse or her mail or her phone. But something felt wrong. I can't explain it exactly. It was like a smell in the air. Like when you walk into a house and you can just tell something is off, even if you can't see anything. My son Danny picked up on it too. Danny is our middle child. Lives about 20 minutes away. Comes over for Sunday dinner most weeks. One Sunday in February, after Donna had left the room, he leaned over and said quietly, "Dad? Is everything okay with Mom?" I didn't want to say what I was thinking. So I just said, "I'm not sure." He nodded slowly. Like he already knew. About a week after that, Danny called me on a Tuesday afternoon while Donna was at her book club. He said, "Dad, I need to tell you something and I need you to stay calm." I sat down at the kitchen table. He told me he had seen Mom's car parked outside a condo complex on the east side of town. Multiple times. He had looked up the address. The condo was registered to a man named Gerald Simmons. 63 years old. Retired. Recently divorced. Danny had done some more digging, I won't ask exactly how, and found out that Donna and Gerald had been connected through a Facebook group. A book club. An actual book club. Except it wasn't just books. I sat there at that kitchen table for probably 10 minutes without saying a word. Danny kept saying, "Dad? Dad, are you there?" Finally I said, "I'm here, son." He asked me what I wanted to do. And that's when something shifted inside me. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I got very, very quiet. And I started thinking, I want you to understand something. 50 years is not just a number. 50 years is a mortgage paid off together. It's 3 children raised. It's a savings account built one paycheck at a time for decades. It's a retirement fund that Donna and I had talked about endlessly. Where we'd travel, what we'd do, how we'd finally relax after a lifetime of work. I had approximately $340,000 in our joint savings account. I had $180,000 in a separate investment account. I had the house, which was paid off and worth around $280,000. I also had a small pension from my union. Donna had worked part-time for most of our marriage. She had contributed financially, yes. But the bulk of everything we owned had come from my income over those 38 years. And now she was sneaking around with some retired guy named Gerald while I sat home watching the evening news. I did not confront her right away. I know that might surprise some of you. But here's the thing, I needed information before I made a single move. I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with. So I called an attorney. His name was Richard Calloway, a family law attorney in Columbus who came highly recommended by a guy from my old union hall. I had never needed a lawyer in my life before this. Never even thought about it. I drove to his office on a Wednesday morning and told him everything. He listened carefully. Took notes. Asked questions. Then he explained something to me that changed everything. In Ohio, where we live, marital assets are subject to equitable distribution in a divorce. That means the court divides assets fairly, but fairly doesn't always mean equally. And here's the part that really got my attention. Dissipation of marital assets. That's the legal term for when one spouse deliberately wastes, hides, or transfers marital money, especially in anticipation of divorce. Richard looked at me and said, "Mike, if she empties that joint account before you can act, it will be considered dissipation. The court will factor that in. She will not walk away clean." I nodded. But I also knew I needed to move fast. Because something told me Donna was already planning her exit. I went home that afternoon and acted completely normal. Made dinner. Asked Donna how her day was. Watched TV together. She seemed relaxed. Happy even. That hurt more than I expected. But I kept my face neutral. Over the next 2 weeks, I did several things very carefully and very quietly. First, I moved $170,000 from our joint savings account into a new individual account in my name only. Richard had advised me to do this. I was entitled to do it. It was legal. But I needed to do it before she did. Second, I met with a financial advisor and repositioned my investment account so it was clearly documented as originating from my premarital earnings and union contributions. Paper trail. Clean records. Third, Danny helped me photograph every major asset in the house. Furniture. Appliances. My tools in the garage. My father's watch collection. Everything documented and time-stamped. Fourth, and this is the one that really set the trap. I did not close the joint account. I left it open with $170,000 still sitting in it. I know what you're thinking. Why would I leave that money there? Just wait. I also hired a private investigator. I know. It sounds extreme. But Richard told me that evidence of infidelity, while not always a deciding factor in Ohio divorce proceedings, could absolutely support claims of dissipation and financial misconduct if the affair involved marital money being spent on the other person. Had Donna spent any of our money on Gerald? The investigator found out within 10 days. Yes. She had. Donna had transferred money from our joint account, 3 separate transfers over 6 months, totaling just over $22,000. She had used it to help Gerald furnish his new condo. New furniture. A big TV. A weekend trip to Charleston. With my money. With the money I had woken up at 5 in the morning for 38 years to earn. I sat in Richard's office when he showed me the bank records. I kept my composure. But inside, something hardened in me permanently. 3 weeks after I had started quietly preparing, it happened. I was at the grocery store on a Thursday afternoon, Donna's book club night. My phone buzzed. It was a bank alert. I had set up notifications on the joint account. Withdrawal. $168,500. I stood in the cereal aisle and watched the number appear on my screen. She had gone to the bank. She had withdrawn almost every dollar left in the joint account. I stood there for a moment. Completely still. An older woman with a card bumped into me gently and said, "Excuse me, honey." I said, "No problem." And then I called Richard. He answered on the second ring. I said, "She did it." He said, "How much?" I told him. He said, "Okay. Don't panic. This is actually what we were prepared for. I'm filing the emergency motion tonight. See, here's the thing Donna didn't know. I had already filed for divorce 3 days earlier. Quietly. Through Richard. No drama, no warning. Which meant that the moment she withdrew that money, she wasn't just emptying a bank account. She was dissipating marital assets after divorce proceedings had already begun. That is a very, very different legal situation. Richard had explained it to me clearly. Once divorce is filed, both spouses are essentially prohibited from wasting or hiding marital assets. If they do, the court can, and often does, compensate the other spouse by awarding them a larger share of the remaining assets. Donna had just handed me a massive legal weapon, and she had no idea. I drove home and sat in my kitchen. About an hour later, Donna came through the front door. She was carrying a small bag. She looked surprised to see me sitting at the table. "Mike," she said. I need to talk to you." I said, "Okay." She sat down across from me. She told me she wasn't happy. That she hadn't been happy for a long time. That she had met someone. That she was sorry. She did not mention the bank account. I sat there and I listened to all of it. When she was done, I said very quietly, "I know about Gerald, Donna. I've known for a while." She looked shocked. Then she straightened up and said she wanted a divorce. She said she'd already taken care of a few things, and I could see a flicker of something in her eyes. Confidence, maybe? Like she thought she was already ahead. I nodded slowly. I said, "All right." She seemed confused that I wasn't more upset. She said, "I'm going to stay at a friend's place tonight." I said, "Okay. Drive safe." She left. And I sat there at that kitchen table, the same one I'd sat at for 30 years, and I felt the strangest combination of sadness and calm I've ever felt in my life. The sadness was real. 50 years was real. The love I had for that woman was real. But the calm was real too. Because I knew something she didn't. The game was already over. She just didn't know the score yet. Richard filed the emergency motion the next morning. The court issued a temporary restraining order on marital assets within 48 hours. That meant the $168,500 Donna had withdrawn was now legally flagged. She could not use it to purchase property. She could not transfer it to Gerald. She could not hide it. Every dollar was on the court's radar. But here's where it gets really interesting. The private investigator had already established that Donna had transferred $22,000 in marital funds to benefit Gerald over the past several months. The court documented this as dissipation. Then we discovered something else. Something Danny found completely by accident while helping me go through some old paperwork in the garage. In 2019, I had signed up for a small supplemental life insurance policy. Nothing huge, $150,000 benefit. The kind you get through a union program without thinking too much about it. The beneficiary on that policy? It was still my mother. My mother had passed away in 2017. Richard said that in the event of a divorce, this was a loose end worth addressing, but what it also revealed was that I had a completely separate financial instrument that had never been commingled with marital funds in any way. Clean. Separate. Mine. But that wasn't the biggest twist. The biggest one came from my brother, Earl. Earl is 74 years old and lives in Arizona. We talk on the phone every Sunday. When I told him what was happening, he got very quiet. Then he said, "Mike, do you remember Dad's property?" I said, "What property?" He said, "The 2 acres outside of Lancaster. Dad left it to both of us when he passed. We never did anything with it. I had it appraised a couple years back, just out of curiosity. I never told you because I didn't think it mattered." I said, "Earl, what was the appraisal?" He said, $310,000. I almost fell out of my chair. See, inherited property, even if acquired during a marriage, is considered separate property in Ohio as long as it was never commingled with marital assets. I had inherited that land from my father in 1998. I had never transferred it. Never used it as collateral. Never mixed it into any joint account or asset. It was mine. Entirely and legally mine. Donna had no claim to it. My half of that land was worth $155,000. I hadn't even known it. Richard almost smiled when I told him. He said, "Mike, your wife made a very serious miscalculation." The divorce proceedings took about 9 months. I want to walk you through what happened, because every step felt like justice being served one piece at a time. First, the $168,500 Donna had withdrawn. Because she had taken it after divorce proceedings were filed, the court treated it as a marital asset still subject to division. She had to account for every dollar. Her attorney argued she had a right to it as a joint account holder. Richard countered with the dissipation argument and the documented transfers to Gerald. The judge was not impressed with Donna. The court ordered that the full $168,500 be treated as already received by Donna as her share of the marital estate. In other words, she got to keep it. But it counted against her. Second, the $22,000 she had spent on Gerald. The court added that back to my side of the ledger. Donna was essentially penalized for the money she'd used to furnish her boyfriend's condo with my earnings. Third, the house. The house was worth $280,000. We had lived in it together, so it was a marital asset. The court ordered it sold and proceeds split, but given the dissipation findings, I received a larger percentage. I walked away with $196,000 from the house sale. Donna got $84,000. She had expected half. She got less than a third. Fourth, my pension and investment accounts. Because I had meticulous documentation showing these derived primarily from my individual labor and union contributions, and because Donna had already received the bulk of the liquid cash through the withdrawal, the court gave her a much smaller portion of these than she had anticipated. Her attorney had gone into this expecting a relatively clean 50-50 split. They didn't get anywhere near that. And fifth, the land. My half of Dad's 2 acres? The court confirmed it as separate property. Donna got nothing from it. I sold my share to Earl shortly after the divorce finalized. $155,000. Straight into my account. Now let me tell you about Gerald. Because this part might be my favorite. Gerald Simmons, the man Donna had left 50 years of marriage for, had apparently told her he was financially comfortable. He was recently divorced. New condo. Nice furniture. Seemed stable. What Donna hadn't known, and what she found out shortly after moving in with him, was that Gerald's divorce had not been kind to him financially. He was living largely off credit. The comfortable retirement he had described was mostly fiction. When Donna moved in with her $168,500, which was now legally tracked and could not be freely spent, Gerald apparently had assumed she'd be bringing significant funds to their new life together. When he found out the money was frozen pending court proceedings, and when he found out the actual settlement Donna received was far less than either of them had expected, well, Danny heard through a mutual acquaintance that things between Donna and Gerald had become tense. Very tense. I'm not going to pretend I didn't feel some satisfaction when I heard that. I'm human. About 8 months after the divorce was finalized, I got a call. It was from Donna. She was crying. She told me Gerald had asked her to leave. She told me she was staying in a motel. She told me she was sorry. I held the phone and listened to her cry. And I want to be honest with you, because I think honesty is what makes this story worth telling. It hurt. Not because I wanted her back. I knew that chapter was over the moment she walked out with my savings and drove to another man. But because this was still the woman I had loved for 50 years. The woman who wore a yellow dress at a church dance in 1974. The woman who held my hand when my father passed. The woman who cried happy tears when each of our grandchildren was born. That person was real. And she was gone, not because of the affair, really, but because of what the affair revealed about who she had become. I told her I was sorry she was hurting. I told her I hoped she'd be okay. And then I said, very gently but very clearly, Donna, I've got nothing left to offer you. I wish you well. But we're done. She cried harder. I said goodbye. And I hung up the phone. I want to tell you where I am now. I am living in a smaller house, a nice one, bought outright with cash, in a quiet neighborhood about 30 miles from where we raised our kids. I have a morning routine. Coffee, the newspaper, a walk around the block. Danny and my daughter Claire take turns having me over for Sunday dinner. My youngest, Robert, lives in Seattle, but we talk every week. I have enough money to live comfortably for the rest of my life. Not extravagantly, but comfortably. And after a lifetime of working for it, that's exactly what I planned. I joined a woodworking class at the community center. I'm not particularly good at it. But I like it. I like the quiet. The focus. Making something with my hands again. I met a widower in the class named Frank, not in a romantic way, just a friend, who lost his wife to cancer 2 years ago. We have coffee sometimes and talk about our kids and sports, and the way the world has changed. Good man. Life has gotten quieter. And I have learned, in a way I couldn't have understood at 30 or 40 or even 60, that quiet is not the same thing as empty. Here's what I want to leave you with. Because I know some of you watching this are in the middle of something painful right now. A betrayal. A broken trust. Something that feels like the ground has disappeared under your feet. Here is what I learned. Don't react. Prepare. When I found out what Donna was doing, every instinct I had screamed at me to confront her. Yell. Cry. Demand answers. I didn't. I got quiet. I called a lawyer. I documented everything. I moved carefully and thoughtfully. And because I did that, because I held myself together during the hardest months of my life, I protected everything I had spent a lifetime building. She tried to walk away with half of everything I'd ever worked for. She left with significantly less than a third, and most of that was money she'd already taken. Justice doesn't always look like a dramatic moment. Sometimes justice looks like a patient man sitting across from a very good attorney. Sometimes justice looks like paperwork. My father used to say something when I was growing up. He'd say, "Michael, still water runs deep." I didn't fully understand it when I was young. I do now. The people who make the most noise, who grab and scheme and act like the world owes them everything, they're usually the ones who end up sitting in a motel room, crying into a phone, wondering where it all went wrong. And the quiet ones? The ones who just keep doing what's right. They're usually just fine. 50 years. She thought that was the end of my story. Turns out, it was just the end of a chapter. I've got more to write. And for the first time in a long time. I'm looking forward to it. Subscribe for more stories like this. Comment below. Still water. If you made it to the end. Let Mike know he's not alone.